Welcome, everyone, to the Max Schmarzo podcast. Thanks for tuning in, by the way. As always, a friendly reminder, if you guys are interested in joining my Always an Athlete team, there is a 7-day free trial. Keep it short and sweet. I played college basketball, not high level, Division III basketball. Wasn't the world's greatest basketball player, but I love basketball. I love playing sports. I like lifting, but I like lifting because of what it does for me when I play sports. So I made this Always an Athlete team because I wanted to share with you how I've been training post-collegiate basketball career to still support my athletic endeavors, as well as some of my physical goals. Yeah, I want some bigger arms. I want a bigger bench press and some sweet delts. Is that too much to ask for? Get kind of jacked, be kind of fast. That's kind of the motto of the program. 6 days a week. Check it out. 7-day free trial. It's on the Train Heroic app. Go give it a go. That's the Always an Athlete training team. So we have some fun stuff here today to talk about, people. Some cool stuff. Two topics only. Talking about one, and we're going to open up with the fun one today. Some lunar madness, some moon mayhem, some cool stuff. The random article I read on the Miami Herald. I'm going to pull it up, the actual article myself here, so I can read it for you from the website. And then number two, talking about plyometrics from different positions, and how sometimes when we do plyometrics, we get so caught up in top end speed kind of plyometrics. And some things I've found useful with plyometrics. Again, it's not all encompassing. It's going to be a little bit of a discussion around it, but some things that I found to be very beneficial. Now, we all want to hear about plyometrics, but let's be real. Let's talk about the moon madness. So here's the articles from the Miami Herald, and it says mystery rocket crashes into moon and leaves baffling double crater. Dun, 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 dun. Now, the original article, or the article itself, sounded like it was written to talk about the double crater. In short, something hit the moon and it left what's called a double crater. And they described it in the article. Basically, most normal rockets will leave a single crater because the majority of the mass on the rocket is in one spot. It hits the impact. The back end's typically the engine, the combustion. It's not as heavy, so there's an initial crater. A double crater occurs when the mass is distributed on both ends. Think about like a cartoon dog bone, right? So there's mass on both ends. One is not shaped like a rocket. It's kind of symmetrical, or a dumbbell. It's a fitness podcast, Max. Don't be stupid. Use something that's relevant. A dumbbell. The mass is on one end. You drop it, so it's on its verticalness and the verticalness of it, and the weight hits the moon, and then the second weight of that dumbbell hits the moon and creates a double crater. But let's read a little deeper into this and see what we find. So I'll read directly from it. It goes talk about a mystery rocket body, parentheses, a rocket body, which I love the nebulous of that description. A mystery rocket body crashed into the moon and left a double crater, which is an even bigger mystery to scientists. First off, a mystery rocket body, isn't that kind of a mystery to scientists? What is a rocket body? Well, this is where things get a little weird. So NASA says astronomers spotted the rocket on a collision course with the moon last year, and we're waiting to see what might happen. Like I'm envisioning the control panel. These guys are sitting around like, hey, boss man, it looks like there's a rocket going to the moon. Oh, really? Yeah. What should we do? I don't know. Let's wait around and see what happens, right? That's kind of their plan of action. And we're waiting around to see what might happen. It hit March 4th and apparently put on quite a show, blah, 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 blah. Talks about the crater, how the crater is kind of different. But then it goes on to talk about, in the article itself, that I'm just kind of skipping through. Sorry, I'm reading as I do this. I'm not very good at reading and talking at the same time. Hang in there with me. It basically goes on to say that they had seen this thing a year ago, and since the origin of the rocket body remains uncertain, the double nature crater may indicate its identity. Isn't that a little weird? They don't know what this crater was caused by. First off, it takes 3 days for a rocket to go from Earth to the moon. This thing had been tracking for a year. So you can say one of two things. Either this thing was orbiting, a rocket was arbitrarily orbiting the Earth, and then they realized that its orbital motion was going to eventually crash into the moon. A rocket, by the way. Interesting. Secondly, if not, whatever it was traveling for a year to get to the moon. And it takes 3 days from the moon to the Earth. So obviously it wasn't from the Earth. And secondly, the idea that there is a rocket that can just randomly be launched to the moon and we don't know its origin is kind of frightening. So the only logical explanation to this is aliens. It just is. What else would you call an unidentified flying rocket? Unidentified flying object, an unidentified flying rocket body, an unidentified flying whatever, a UFO. Of course it is. You're telling me NASA can't see a rocket? They don't have some ability to observe what the heck is going on? The number of satellites we have up there between us and the moon, I'd imagine would be quite a bit. Our ability to at least see what is going on in space is probably reasonable. If this thing is orbiting around Earth for a year, it should have passed by something we could get visual ID on. So I get it. The article was written to be like, hey, look, it's about, it's about this weird crater and what could the crater have been? And who knows what the crater could have been? But in reality, it was just a very odd article by the fact that you had this object that was floating around up there that, could have, it's a rocket from another place that we can identify. Let that sink in for a second. A rocket flying around that we couldn't identify crashed into the moon and left a weird crater that we said, isn't that a weird crater? And at the same time, we don't know where that rocket came from. In other words, the only reasonable place it could have came from is probably aliens. So think about that. Look it up. And the article is called, well, I just read it to you, but I'll read it to you again in case you guys want to go check it out yourself. It is a mystery rocket crashes into moon and leaves double crater. The Miami Herald had it. Mystery rocket crashed into moon and leaves crater. So I think Live 5 News had it, whatever the heck that is. It's low. I don't even know what place it's. Whatever. You can check it out. It's wherever. Give it a read. Very bizarre article. I'll leave it there. I like to share those fun things with you. Obviously, it has to be an alien. I mean, realistically, do you really, really think that some sort of rocket can just be floating around? A rocket could be launched, and we're like, no idea where that came from. Let's see what happens when it hits the moon. Seems like a bad idea. But nonetheless, they might have leaked some information that they shouldn't have, because now we're hot on the trail. Investigative journalism here with Max Schmarzo on the Max Schmarzo podcast. But let's talk about what y'all came for, probably. The plyometrics, right? You probably didn't come for the moon stuff, the moon madness. One of my exercises I use in my plows are moon bounds. Great exercise, big fan. So maybe I should do some moon bounds in honor of today. So when it comes to plyometrics, let's talk about some of the mistakes I see made. I think more times than not, the origin of plyometrics is often traced back to track and field, triple jump, high jump, sprinting. Those are kind of the three big ones, long jump as well. What all three of those have in common is they are upright takeoff positions for the most part, high velocity, and again, preceding movement. In other words, they're biased. A lot of these plyometrics are biased towards high velocity, large ankle stiffness, minimal joint range of motion movements. In sport, go watch a basketball game. The opposite is true at times. Not all plyometrics have to have a preceding high velocity. So when it comes to training, I think the obsessive progression of moving towards plyometrics that are high velocity, top end speed bias is a mistake. Now, there is an interesting research study done by Bosco and Paavo Komi. I don't know what the research is, the paper is. It was sent to me. Apparently, it was only published in Italian, at least from what I've heard, saw. And it looked at manipulating the landing position from a drop jump. And so they basically thought of this same thing. Well, a lot of these movements are kind of biased. What happens if we do a movement that trains a joint angle that commonly is seen in volleyball, because volleyball has a lower approach velocity in their jumps. And what they found was these drop jumps, when they were done from a more knee bent position upon contact and then exploding up right away, they had greater benefits to vertical jump. So let's talk about that movement really quick and what I mean by that. In a traditional drop jump, you jump off of a box, you hit the ground in a fairly upright, kind of close to knee extension position, and you spring back up as high as you can. Now, I'm not talking about actively letting yourself sink upon contact. I'm talking about manipulating your amount of knee flexion and hip flexion. So when you hit the ground, you're in that pre-bent position that you would then jump back up. Think about that position as the position of point reversal in which you would do a counter movement jump. If I were to do a counter movement jump, bend over and jump as high as I can, that bottom position is where I transition from, well, that the eccentric, as I lost my words, eccentric to concentric portion, and I jump up. That reversal point is where you want the initial plyometric impact, because that is where you're like, okay, I'm going to now contract and produce as much force as possible from this bottom position. And so that leads me to believe that we are leaving a lot on the table if we're not manipulating certain contact positions. And so one of the big mistakes I see with plyometrics is arbitrary obsession of plyometrics being biased towards top end speed. That is the more upright position. And that's totally fine. And sometimes people need to work on that. And that's, part of progression. But not every progression needs to be done in that manner. Not every progression needs to be done to be a quicker and quicker, more upright. You can do quicker ground contact times, higher jump heights, but you can do it from those specific point and reversal positions. So you can still progress faster off the ground, higher off the ground, larger eccentric velocity, but doing it from modifiable contact positions, not biasing it towards, as I go quicker and quicker, I just bend less and less at my knees. So that's really important concept to keep in mind. And that's something people make a mistake of. They don't think about why plyometrics exist. And so with that in mind, you can also mess around with some of the preceding movements, the initial velocity, the direction. Is it lateral? Is it side to side? Is it backwards? All those things are really important. You can also mess with the speed at which the eccentric is loaded, as well as the concentric takeoff speed. You can mess with the surfaces, hard surface, light surface, a soft surface. You can mess with band assisted or band accelerated. All these things have a role. By the end of the day, they're having a role to progress yourself towards a specific outcome. They are like, look, I want to get to this kind of progression point. Well, that progression point doesn't always have to be biased towards top end speed work. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that so often a lot of these plyometrics are biased towards top end speed work that we ignore the fact that a lot of those positions aren't actually hit in sport. If you look at a basketball player, again, a lot of it's played out of these acceleration positions. Very rarely do you have extremely high knees and you get top velocity sprints. It's often from a fairly static position to an aggressive 1-2, or even a moderate slow pace into a more acceleration into a jump, like a fast break or some type of screening action where you're pacing the play. And understanding those positions you get in and operate large forces from is really important. So if you go back to Verkhoshansky, the Soviet researcher, and look at some of his means and methods of organizing movement and structure, looking at where the joint motion or angle, where the most amount of force is produced in a specific movement, should help you identify type of movements that load that specific joint angle. So just doing plyometrics, arbitrarily being faster, higher off the ground, doing hurdle jumps quicker, higher eccentric velocities is not necessarily correct, because we then ignore the fact that the joint range of motion isn't even the right one. And that's so critical. Another aspect I want to mention really quick as well is people forget the feel aspect. One of the things when I coach a plyometric and teach it, I want to help people understand the feel. And so you don't always need to do things maximally. You want to videotape, show an athlete who does it well. And once they acquire the subjective feel of it, that athlete will be much more informed at progressing themselves. A lot of times you might just say, do that or do this, and they're just arbitrarily doing a movement. But plyometrics tend to be so closely related in nature to that sporting movements that you do want some subjective feel. While you might say, well, Max, I don't I'm not going to do a hamstring curl and feel how that's going to carry over to my sport. That's totally okay. It's not having or integrating any of these skill aspects of sport, and it's not complex, or it's not orchestrated in the way a skill movement would be done in sport. However, a plyometric probably at times is closely related to a sporting movement. And so having that connection between sport is really important to have. That's something I think is often overlooked as well. So feel, and then the end result of what you're trying to accomplish. So I'll keep that there, and I'll dive into some of those specific aspects in different episodes, but I want to give you some of the general issues I see with that. By the way, I am wearing a beast mode t-shirt. A beast mode, no, not Marshawn Lynch. It is a picture of Teen Wolf, Michael J. Fox, the original one. And for those of you out there, I'm going to pose a question to you, and I hope you come with an answer, because I'll do this in my next episode. Name 3 great basketball movies that are, or scenes, I should say, basketball scenes that are not in directly basketball movies. Like a basketball movie is where the outcome of the basketball game is the centerpiece of the movie. So something like Hoosiers or Glory Road, or I don't really know many basketball movies that I start to say them out loud. Blue Chips, I guess, is one of them, are all basketball related movies. Space Jam, basketball movies. I'm talking about scenes that are in basketball movies, or movies that have basketball in it, but are not basketball specific. Teen Wolf is kind of a middle ground. I'll put it in a not basketball movie. That's one of my favorite ones. Escape from LA has an amazing scene with Snake. I advise all of you to check that out. That's going to be one of my videos. We talk about the Snake Plissken scene from Escape from LA, where he has to make a certain number of shots in like 30 seconds or whatever. The clock 10 seconds each way. I'll talk about it, but I want you to check it out. Google Snake Plissken Escape from LA scene. It's one of the greatest basketball scenes in a non-basketball movie. So we'll do that as a segment coming up, and I'll have some fun here as well. Hopefully answer some questions, and we'll answer some questions if Q&A that you all have going forward. So other than that, I do want to give you guys a little bit of a tip or something, or some advice I have, because I want to share with you as I make this podcast, how this podcast grows, because people come on here and listen to some of the business side of things as well. And it's the idea of being persistent. When I first started this podcast, and we still don't get a lot of views on this podcast initially, we don't having many followers, but it's important to be patient, persistent, or consistent, and then also find ways to promote it in ways that you feel comfortable. I did a really bad job when I first put this out. I didn't put any clips out of stuff, but you can do really easy things like repurposing your own content across many different platforms. So as a strength coach, I know sometimes you might not, as any person, you might not like filming yourself, and that's totally okay. But it's worse than filming yourself is having to film yourself 7 different times for 7 different platforms: Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, wherever, Snapchat, wherever else you want to be. Let's try and find ways to repurpose the same filming across numerous different platforms. Remember, each platform is slightly different, so the formatting might be different. The length of the clip might be different. But at the end of the day, trying to make 7 different clips for 7 different platforms is exhausting, and it's not fun. I did a really bad job of this initially when I made this podcast. I started just releasing it across one platform, said Podcast World. But I need to do a better job of repurposing some of the content, putting it on my Instagram stories, putting it on TikTok, putting it on Twitter, so I can have higher yield per unit of effort on this. So I wanted to share that with you all, because that's a mistake I have been making. If I make a mistake, you probably might make that mistake too, and hopefully you can learn from it. It doesn't need to be perfect. You can just do it on your phone, a quick edit, a screen record, whatever it might be. It's not the prettiest, but it gets the job done and gets the point across to help people get some more views on here. Because I noticed when I started doing that, my viewership started to go up a little bit. So I want to leave it here today. I appreciate you all. As always, take care. Check out the Moon Madness video article. Miami Herald had it. Check out the Snake Plissken basketball scene. Awesome. I'm excited to talk to y'all next time about it. Peace out. Take care. And as always, I hope you all enjoyed.